Hey guys, my name's Kyle. This is Auditing with Autism. Recently, I was talking about Friedrich Nietzsche and his book "Thus Spake Zarathustra," and I wrote said a little bit about his a commentator of this book, a man by the name of Anthony Ludovici. And Anthony Ludovici wrote in 1909 about this book so that we could understand it a little bit better. And he wrote his notes in the back of the book. And I mentioned in my video that I made recently about propaganda and consensus a sentence from Ludovici's statements about this chapter called The Sublime Ones. And, I only said one sentence from that paragraph. The sentence I said is, to be able to smile while speaking of lofty things and not be oppressed by them is the secret of real greatness. And he's suggesting that's what Nietzsche is saying, because Nietzsche is describing how a great person is like a camel, in the sense that a camel will stand there while you're loading the camel's back with weight, basically, and the camel is a great person, as the metaphor goes, because the camel will stand there and accept all the weight that you're giving it. It doesn't revolt, reject it, or get angry and upset about it. And so that's what he is implying, when he says that the greatness comes from being able to smile when you're being oppressed, like that camel. But I wanted to read the rest of the paragraph because it's just so beautiful. And I had somebody in the comments talking about, the fact that it wasn't Nietzsche who said that sentence about smiling while being oppressed. It was another person who was implying that's what Nietzsche was meaning when he wrote that chapter. Listen to this. This is incredibly beautiful. And again, this is Anthony Ludovici talking about the chapter called The Sublime Ones that Friedrich Nietzsche had written. The sublime ones, he says, these belong to a type which Nietzsche did not altogether dislike, but which he would fain have rendered more subtle and plastic. It is the type that takes life and itself too seriously, that never surmounts the camel stage mentioned in the first discourse, and that is obdurately sublime and earnest. To be able to smile while speaking of lofty things and to not be oppressed by them is the secret to real greatness. This is great. He whose hand trembles when it lays hold of a beautiful thing has the quality of reverence without the artist's unembarrassed friendship with the beautiful. Hence the mistakes which have arisen in regard to confounding Nietzsche with his extreme opposites, the anarchists and the agitators, for what they dare to touch and break with the impudence and irreverence of the unappreciative, he, Nietzsche, seems to likewise touch and break, but with other fingers, with the fingers of the loving and unembarrassed artist who is on good terms with the beautiful and who feels able to create it and to enhance it with his touch. It's so beautiful. He lastly says the question of taste plays an important part in Nietzsche's philosophy. And Nietzsche says, neither a good, Nietzsche says, quote, neither a good nor a bad taste, but my taste, which I have no longer either shame or secrecy, unquote. And so, I think the whole thing is beautiful. But what I really wanted to point out is the idea of the sentence after the one that I quoted originally. Not to be oppressed by lofty things is the secret of real greatness. And then he says, he whose hand trembles when it lays hold of a beautiful thing has the quality of reverence. He's not saying that's a good thing exactly. He's saying it's good to be reverent, to appreciate the reverence of it, and to have that feeling of reverence. But a person whose hand is trembling because of the beauty is in a different place than the person who has an artist's unembarrassed friendship with the beautiful. And that's, I think, an important difference between, you know, the common man that Nietzsche is describing and the Ubermensch or the Superman that Nietzsche is also describing in that book. You know, and it makes a lot of sense. It's so easy to be, you know, reverent with things that are beautiful, and therefore, you know, he says, have trembling hands. But to have that unembarrassed relationship is different, because now you're basically a part of the beauty. You know, if your hand is trembling and you have reverence for that beauty, there's an implication there that you're not a part of the beauty, that the reason you're trembling so much is that you're recognizing something other than yourself. And while that's important, especially on the path towards being an Ubermensch or a Superman, or just being a better person, I would say, it, you know, it's sort of like a path, knowing how to recognize the beauty, being comfortable enough to embrace the beauty, and then actually to have you know, an artist's unembarrassed relationship with the beautiful, so that it becomes a part of who you are, in a sense where, you know, when you live your life, your whole life becomes an art show. You know, you actually are, you promulgate, you push forth the beauty of life, and you do it in a, you know, in an artful way, so that people uh, will see the beauty in it. And in an artful way, I don't mean just, you know, classic art like writing or drawing or playing music, but in the sense that, you know, everything that we do, from making tea to driving a car to, you know, living life, is an act of art. But it can only be an act of art if we can, you know, recognize the beautiful, the true, and the good, one might say, and and appreciate it. So, you know, I hope I'm not talking about lofty things in a way that is condescending. You know, I've been called condescending recently, and I just got to point out that, you know, my intention is never to be condescending. I'm trying to share information, and I love you guys, and I would never put anybody down ever. Uh, the 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 real message that I wanted to say about condescending is intention. You know, if somebody is committing a crime, let's say they're stealing something, you know that stealing is wrong. And so you could judge them and condemn them. But if you don't understand the intention for the crime, you're making a mistake. I mean, I remember classically in that play, you know, Les Miserables, for example, Jean Valjean was stealing food, bread for his family and his child. He got caught stealing, and they put him in prison forever, and he lost everything. But nobody paid attention to the intention behind the crime, you know. And so it's really important to understand people's intentions, you know, and to maybe, if you want to condemn somebody, bring in condemnation to see if the intention is centered around love or not love. And to me, that's the whole story here. So, and I love you guys. I would never condescend to anybody and or treat anybody that way. So have a great day, you guys. Bye bye.